Thanks, Janet. Thank you for those kind words and for the invitation to join you tonight. Some of the stuff that I'll touch on may have been covered in different ways by the other speakers. That's always the joy of coming last. But it is a critical issue that we're talking about tonight, and one that's been going on, for far, far too long in our society. Sexual harassment at work remains far too common. It manifests itself in different ways, from inappropriate comments and unwanted advances to more severe and violent forms. But at its core, as we've already touched on, sexual harassment is about power and control rooted in inequalities within workplaces and wider society, and it disproportionately affects women. Anybody can be a victim and survivor, particularly those, though, that are in vulnerable or precarious employment situations. Every single woman that you know, work with, or talk to will experience sexual harassment at least once in their lifetime. Every single woman. Most more than once, and usually from a male perpetrator. And while some men will experience sexual harassment, and there are other intersectional examples as well, it is well established that it isn't as frequent as women experiencing it. And when you add into the mix other protected characteristics, it does question why it has been going on for too long. So why does sexual harassment persist? Firstly, workplace culture can be a significant factor, as we've touched on, when workplaces have entrenched gender inequalities, hierarchical structures or cultures that tolerate inappropriate behaviour as banter, harassment then thrives, and this toxic culture silences victims and survivors who fear retaliation or just not being believed. Secondly, the imbalance of power plays a substantial role. Harassment frequently occurs where power is concentrated, often managers, supervisors, or more senior colleagues exerting their influence or exploiting vulnerabilities. And this dynamic can put people off reporting, as they feel that there'll be professional repercussions or isolation, or they're going to get moved to a store that's an hour down the road. But how can unions help end sexual harassment at work and beyond? Identifying when harassment's taking place as a rep isn't always straightforward, but signs that reps can look out for include a sudden change in a worker's behaviour, such as withdrawal, anxiety, or avoidance of certain individuals or places, a noticeable drop in performance, increased absenteeism, or requests for transfers, and that could be departments as well as stores. Observing inappropriate or overfamiliar behaviour from certain individuals, even if it's then passed off as jokes or friendliness, you kind of get the vibe, don't you, when something's not quite right. And reports or hints from colleagues indicating discomfort around certain people or groups. We know in the trade union movement, historically, they've been don't go there when that person's there. There's kind of been this open secret of people to avoid. Union reps must create trust, so that workers feel safe to come forward, knowing that their concerns will be taken seriously, confidentially, but most of all, that they will be believed and supported. And unions more widely have got a critical role in tackling sexual harassment, which is why more and more are joining the End Not Defend campaign. Unions must actively educate members about what constitutes sexual harassment, because as we heard earlier, people sometimes think that it's part of the job, but it absolutely isn't. We need to be educating the rights of workers, how to seek support, hold regular training sessions like this, and workshops to help change attitudes and empower individuals to stand against harassment, and utilise the documents that the campaign has put together to help and support this work. We've got to advocate for clear, robust anti-harassment, zero tolerance policies within workplaces. They need explicit definitions, clear procedures for reporting, and firm commitments to confidentiality and zero tolerance. They can't just be paper documents that collect dust. They have to be acted upon. And that's where the reps come in to make sure they are when there's unions in the workplace. But um, equally, where they're not, we've got to find a mechanism to hold employers accountable, because survivors shouldn't feel shamed. They haven't done anything wrong. That shame should firmly land at the feet of the perpetrator, as well as the organisation that has allowed that behaviour to happen, or for that culture to develop to empower that behaviour. Unions need to provide easily accessible, safe reporting mechanisms and support networks within unions, ensure that victims and survivors have access to counselling, legal support and advocacy. And union reps must include specific clauses on sexual harassment and gender-based violence in collective bargaining agreements. This helps embed protections into workplace cultures and management obligations. And, we should be actively campaigning at a legislative level for stronger laws and better enforcement against workplace harassment and violence. And I know that is some of the work that the campaign is helping facilitate and doing a brilliant job at it. But also trade union leaders like myself, need to talk more openly about our own experience of sexual harassment and violence. Because if we can't do that to try and remove some of the stigma around that's attached to situations, how can we expect workers that feel in more vulnerable positions because of their precarious work or because of the structure of their workplace? How can we expect them to speak publicly about it? We've got to do our part.